On this edition of Hall Talk, we'll be talking about the women's soccer team, who, with only 2 games remaining, have only one conference win on the season, so they will be looking to get something from these 2 games. Over on the men's side, they've had a very good season, picking up some big wins against number 10 Oregon State and some other conference opponents. Then heading over to the volleyball court, they've also had a good season, being 13-7 with new head coach Shannon Thompson. So, will the women's soccer team be able to salvage something with the short season that remains? Will the men's soccer team be able to make a run into the Big East tournament? And will the women's volleyball team finish out the season strong, having one of their best seasons in years? All this and more. I'm Louie Pasculli, and this is Hall Talk. Hello everyone and welcome back to Hall Talk. Once again, I'm Louie Pasculli, joined by my esteemed colleague Graham Marshman. And before we get into talking about everything today, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Louie. I'm just here, first time on Hall Talk. I'm really excited, and I'm really looking forward to get to talk about some Seton Hall sports.
And we have a debut. That is awesome to hear. First, we're going to talk about the women's soccer team. Now, it's been a little bit of a rough season this year. They started off the season well and out of conference play, winning 4 games, and then when they got to in-conference play, only picked up 1 in-conference win. But first, I want to talk about a player that stood out to you. So, who on this team have you seen who has played well thus far?
Well, definitely Natalie Tavana. She has the top goal scorer right now with 3 goals on the season. She's definitely putting in the work offensively for this team. And some big standout youngsters on this team, Sarah and Grace Mitchell, definitely putting in the work on defense. And I'm really excited for this team. They're very young. Sure, they're not getting the results they probably would have hoped for this year, but it's a young, promising team, Louis. So I'm very excited for them.
And I agree. They do have young talent. They will be hopefully good for years to come, even though this year was a bit of a bump in the road. A player that I like to watch this year so far has been Emma Sheehan. She has been really, really good offensively. She doesn't quite have the stats to show for it. I think she picked up 1 goal this season and a few assists. But nonetheless, she reminds me of a C.J. Teebling. Now, Graham, I know you're a freshman, a little bit too young to remember C.J. Teebling, but he was a very, very good player for the Seton Hall men's side. He was a true target guy. He would just go up and get the ball, dribble past some players and score. Emma Sheehan reminds me of him with her style of play. And also, she's pretty versatile, though. She can do a little bit of everything. So her passing is very good, I've seen so far. Also shooting, of course, and dribbling also. So Emma Sheehan, she's also a freshman. Another good part is that she'll have 3 more years here at the Hall on the soccer team. So I think she has played very, very well thus far. And I'll be looking forward to see how her career progresses throughout her time at the Hall. Now, the next topic I want to talk about regarding the women's soccer team is the head coach. New head coach Josh Ozit has some background in recruiting over at Rutgers. Implemented some new tactics this year. How do you think he's done so far?
Well, on the recruiting side, I definitely think he's brought in a lot of good young players this year. The 2 I already talked about, Sarah and Grace, and then Maddie, a nice right back who's been very good this year, and bringing in a new 9. So I'm definitely excited to see what he can do as a recruiter and as a coach. His tactics don't seem to be working out in conference play right now in the Big East. There's a little bit of a disconnect. Maybe it's because the team is so young and they need to gel a little bit with each other, learn how to play with each other, and they'll improve in the season. Or if it's a coaching problem, which I don't think it is. I think once he gets in there, he implements his style, and they start to gel with each other. I think in a few years, maybe 2 or 3, they'll definitely look a lot better than they are looking right now.
And to your point about the tactics, I think it's a good idea. I think Seton Hall needed a little bit of better execution, though, this year, because we saw them have times where they would get caught out and they would put all the emphasis on the back 3 having to defend an oncoming counterattack. And so that's obviously not ideal for the soccer team. But I do like how it's flexible. They can have either 3 in the back or 5 in the back. I like that aspect. But again, sometimes we would see them get caught out, which is not ideal. Also, as you mentioned, the recruiting class, I think that this year was fantastic for that. We have a lot of freshmen playing valuable minutes and even starting for the Seton Hall soccer team. And I think next year more of the same is to come with his recruiting ability. So going forward, I think you're absolutely correct in that the team will look better tactics-wise, as well as keep bringing in good freshman classes that can contribute from day one. So the last thing I want to talk about, though, with this women's soccer team is the future, which we kind of talked about a little bit. But the team is young. But instead of saying the future as a whole, I want to look towards next year specifically. What do you expect from this team next year?
I definitely expect an improvement. 1-7-1 on the season this year. It's not good enough, and I think that they can definitely do a lot better than they're doing right now. But again, they are young. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt with that. These kids will improve. They will get a lot better. So no matter what, I think it's only up for this team. And I think their biggest aspect that they need to improve on right now is finishing. Shooting 13 shots against Creighton in their last game and drawing 1-1 is it's not what you want to see from a team. They need to maybe work on their finishing a little bit, and I think they'll definitely improve next year, 100%.
And that's a really good point. Finishing absolutely is something that this team has to improve on. I think with how young it is, having another year under the same system, running the same tactics, I think that will help a lot as well. Something I looked at is the goaltending, though. That scares me a little bit. Grace Gordon has been pretty good back there. She gives up just over 1 goal a game, and she's made some really big saves. The backup, Anna Prower, is only a sophomore, but she hasn't played too much so far, so there may be a bit of a learning curve when she steps into the net next year for Seton Hall if they don't get any transfers or a freshman. But the little bit that she has shown has been pretty good. I mean, she came in for a half, kept a clean sheet, and then unfortunately got hurt and had to come out, which is not ideal. But nonetheless, she has shown a little bit, but again, she hasn't played the minutes that Grace Gordon have. I mean, we're talking about the last 2 years. She played basically every minute that she possibly could. Except for very few and rare occasions. So that is something that could be a bit of a struggle point there for Seton Hall, but with the players who are returning in the same formation, the same tactics, I think that will be a strong point for the Hall going forward. Now we're going to transition over and talk about the men's side for a little bit. They have had a better season. As I said in the intro, they've had a few big wins. They drew with Xavier, who's currently second in the Big East, and they also beat early in the season non-conference play. They beat number 10 Oregon State, which was crazy because that game was on the road. They traveled there and won, which made it even better. So what are your overall thoughts on the season so far?
Well, in their last 3 games, Louie, they've won 1, drawn 1, and lost 1. But the thing is with them, that team is so good. They are a very good team. Going to watch them in person, especially those first few non-conference games against like Army and Oregon State, they played great. It was amazing to watch. And I think the thing that's hurt them the most this year is injuries. They've lost seniors like Aiden O'Leary and a junior in Mateus Sundell for their back line, which I think has really hurt the team, not just in a defensive sense, but also in a leadership sense, where those guys were big role models for this team, and it seems like maybe it shook them a little bit for the rest of the season, but they're a strong team that really play with a lot of heart and energy, and I like that, and they're making a good push. So let's hope that they can get in the Big East Conference and make a nice run in the tournament.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and you talked about Eden O'Leary. He was the captain for this team, so the leadership role is a little bit diminished because he can't lead with example. He only has to lead, from the sidelines, which is really unfortunate. You want your star center back to be out on the pitch every minute of every game, making big plays and getting his team excited. But unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to do that. But the team seems to have rallied around him and the other injuries that they've picked up this year because they have done well. And I think that the form can continue, and we're going to look forward into these next 2 games of the season for this team. They have Butler, and then they also have Villanova, I believe it is. And Butler is very good. Butler is ranked in the top 5 of the Big East Conference, but Villanova, on the other hand, is ranked very low. I believe they're second to last, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you think will happen in these next 2 games?
I think they can definitely get a result, whether it's a point or 3 points. They can definitely get a result against a good Butler team who's ranked in the top 5. They just need to hold strong, keep together, and they got to finish their chances. Again, they've been struggling a little bit with their chances, but I definitely think they can pull out a good result against Butler, which would be huge going into the tournament for seeding. And Villanova, there should be no problem with Villanova. They're ranked one of the bottom teams. There should be no problem with Villanova. I think they'll definitely get it done against them.
And Villanova, playing a team like that this late in the season, it's a must-win game. Obviously, the Butler game is going to be very important because it's a better opponent who has better quality. But Seton Hall cannot slip up against Villanova because those are the games that linger in your mind when it comes to Big East play, and then potentially the tournament, the NCAA tournament, if Seton Hall is ranked high enough to get into that. So it's a game like Villanova that I'm going to look at and say this team has to go out and win convincingly because otherwise it could really hinder them going forward. And obviously that is not something that we would want to see. As you can see the bow ties, you can see the pin, tad biased, but nonetheless, it's very, very true. And speaking about the tournament, I believe it was my spring semester of freshman year, because it got delayed because of COVID, Seton Hall was a soccer school. They had made the tournament. They made a little bit of a run. It was really awesome to see, and then eventually it came to an end. But nonetheless, is Seton Hall going back to being a soccer school?
Well, have heard plenty of stories from upperclassmen talking about that Seton Hall team that made a really good run in the NCAA tournament, and how the year after was a little bit of a letdown year last year, because they had pretty much gotten all their kids back and they were ready to make another run, and just something didn't click with the team, and they really fell off hard last year. But this year, definitely think they can come close to replicating that team. They play with a lot of heart. Yes, it's going to be hard without having two of their star center backs and a captain and leadership on the team, but this team plays with a lot of heart, Louie, and that's what Seton Hall's about. We play with heart here, and I definitely think that those kids can go out there and definitely make a run, because we're from Seton Hall and that's what we do.
And also the passing on this team is very, very good. It's something I always admire, and every time I go to a game, I'm shocked at how good these guys are at passing the soccer ball around. They're very unselfish, and they're willing to facilitate and wait and just see if they can get an opportunity, see if they can get an offensive chance without rushing, which I personally love. It's something that I think more teams in college should be doing, but nonetheless, Seton Hall have utilized that skill to their advantage, and they've done a good job doing that. And so I agree with you. I think that why not? Why not us? You know what I mean? That Seton Hall, this is a team that very well could make a run. I think they can have a very good Big East, assuming that these next 2 games of the regular season go well, and then hopefully it will propel them into having a high ranking into the NCAA tournament. But now we're going to transition over into volleyball for the last segment of our show here on Hall Talk. It's the women's volleyball. They're having a nice season so far. They have a 13-7 record, and there's 10 games remaining in the season. They are currently 4th place in the Big East, and this is, again, as I mentioned in the intro, under head coach Shannon Thompson. And so they've had a good season so far. I didn't know how they'd be with a new head coach, but they're having a very good season.
Yes, they are. They are having a very good season, coming in at 13-7 on the year, but right now they're in a bad run. 0-3 in their last 3 games. They need to get out. Volleyball is a big momentum game. I played volleyball. When your momentum's not on your side, it is very hard to come out of, and that takes the team and the coach to really rally the players together and push them to at least get a few wins to round out the season here, which I think we can get a very good ranking in the standings toward the end here. If we just finish out these last couple games, get some good wins, I definitely think we can finish strong and make a run in the tournament. But 0-3 in their last 3 games, it's going to be a struggle for them. They're going to need to pick up the momentum on that team.
It will be a little bit of a struggle, and this is something that Seton Hall hasn't really dealt with. They've been pretty even. They haven't really gone on. They have had a few winning streaks, I'll say, but they really haven't had a losing streak. They were, I believe it was 10-2 or something crazy. Just a few games ago. So this is something that this team has not really seen thus far this season. So it's the resiliency, the Seton Hall resiliency that we talked about a little bit earlier on this episode. It's going to have to show through if they're going to want to finish out the season strong. And players like Jacobowski, who has been so good, she is extremely energetic. She's always in the huddle, energizing the team up, giving high fives all around. And even when things aren't going well, she will get a bit mad, but nonetheless, she'll try to keep her cool, try to tell her teammates, it's okay, we have time, we can do this. And it's players like her who I think are really going to propel this team into being having a good season into the Big East tournament. That will do it for this episode of Hall Talk. For our producers and crew, and my analyst Graham Marshman, my name is Louie Pasculli. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.